Hi folks, apologise for the lighting. I haven't got any video lights with me, so I've just got the sun coming through here and the lighting will probably change a bit during the video. Anyway, I wanted to go through a quick overview of my hiking gear for the Bibbulmun Track and what I'm using in 2023 and moving forward. If I make changes, I'll update another video later. But I'm pretty happy with this setup, and I was pretty happy with how things went on the Bibbulmun. I was comfortable, you know, I was able to make good progress, yeah, happy with everything, how everything worked. So I'll just run through, starting with my clothing, and then I'll go through the pack and the pack contents. Well, actually, I won't start with my clothing. I'll just mention my hiking poles. So I use hiking poles. I think they're an excellent idea. These ones are Black Diamond Carbon Z, so they're carbon trekking poles. They're not actually a set because I've had a few problems with different things rusting and clogging up and that sort of thing, so it's probably not a great advertisement, but anyway, generally I find them pretty good though. I've got an adjustable set for when I use, so all my shelters use trekking poles, with the exception I suppose of the hammock, because you're using trees for that, although I do use trekking poles to create a bit of a porch. But my other shelters, my tent and my bivvy system, depending on whichever I happen to be camping with, use trekking poles, and for the tent in particular I need to be able to adjust the height, so that's a semi-adjustable pole there. Generally I was pretty happy with the performance of the trekking poles. You know, they're light, they're really effective. I should highlight one thing though, and that's that a lot of people don't have particularly good technique with the hiking poles or the trekking poles, so I've noticed that before, and what I'll try and do is put a link in the description to good technique for hiking poles. If you can get it right, they make a massive difference. So for example, you know, making sure that the height of the pole is correct, that you put your hand through from the bottom, okay, that way you can be hands-free if you need to. You can drop the poles and still they won't fall off, and you can also put a bit of pressure on them as you're walking. And one of the other things is, most of the time, except for when I'm going downhill in particular, the tips of the poles don't really go in front of the center line of my body, so I'm always pushing myself forward. Okay, so my arm movements with the trekking poles are fairly minimal. Okay, I'm just sort of almost swinging my arms. The other thing is matching the alternate pole and foot as you're taking steps. Okay, so the poles should be pushing you forward. You shouldn't be trying to push yourself up into the air with the poles, okay, because that does nothing. I'm pretty sure that there was only one person I noticed on the track who could fly, or appeared to be able to fly, because I just saw marks from her trekking poles on the ground and no steps, so that was pretty interesting. I don't know what was going on there. Anyway, yeah, so for the rest of us, we have to use the poles to push us forward, okay, and that's the most effective way. Trekking poles, so great idea. You know, if you're using a trekking pole tent or something like that, you're going to need them for the shelter anyway, but I think they make a massive difference. For me personally, I can walk much further with poles. Okay, so just in terms of my clothing, I'll start from the bottom and work up. So the footwear I use these Ultra Lone Peaks. I've been using Ultra for a number of years now. I think I had about 7 or 8 pairs of the previous model I was using, which was a Superior, which is a more minimalist shoe, and I changed over to these Lone Peaks for a bit more padding. I think I've had at least about 6 of these. They're great. My previous pair, it lasted at least 1,500 to 2,000 kilometers, my last pair, so I was pretty confident that one pair would get me all the way through the Bibbulmun Track at around 1,000 kilometers. Some people replace them after 500 miles, which I don't know, is around 700 k's or so. Maybe there's an argument to do that, I don't know. I started to get blisters sort of 700 to 800 kilometers in, so maybe the shoes were a contributing factor there. I'm not really sure, but you know, that's pretty minor. I mean, I got, you know, a couple of blisters on my heels and on my toes and that, but I was still able to keep walking. I just had a 0 day. And I was pushing it pretty hard on gravelly roads and that. You know, I find flat surfaces like that is when I tend to get blisters. You know, all the ups and downs of rough terrain, no problems. But just when I'm walking constantly on roads or flat surfaces, that seems to be when there's a wearing on particular parts of my foot. Anyway, happy with the Ultras. They're fantastic. They dry really quickly. These are the non-waterproof versions. If you're in the snow, maybe you might want to consider others, but certainly for this type of stuff, for most of 99.9% of what I do at least, these are fantastic and they dry really quick. Moving on to the socks. So these socks are the Darn Tough. So I had 2 pairs of socks with me. One was the Darn Tough and the other was Injinji. That was Injinji liner socks. And what I did was I wore the Injinji because they were thinner and they dried quicker on wet days. So when it was going to be wet all day, I wore the Injinji, and that worked great because like the Ultras, they dry pretty quickly. So you can just keep walking and they'll dry super fast, or you know, when you get to camp you can hang them up and they'll dry on you quite quickly. The only problem with the Injinji, and I've found this with every pair that I've had, is they develop holes fairly quickly. So over the course of, well, I mean, obviously I wasn't using them all the time, but over the course of the Bibbulmun, my pair got one big hole, okay, in the sole, like that. I actually kept walking with it because it didn't really affect me that much. I had like not a blister, but maybe a little bit of, you know, rough skin or peeled skin, you know, where my foot was making contact with the shoe, but nothing to worry about at all there. And you know, it was good on wet days to be able to keep wearing them. But I picked up another pair while I was in Perth, which you'll probably see as we're going through the video. Now, the Darn Tough, you know, they stood up fine, although I actually swapped pairs of Darn Tough about halfway through the track. So these are a new pair. The other ones weren't you know, didn't develop any holes, but they were showing signs of wear in a couple of places. But then those same socks have done probably the equivalent of a couple of through hikes. I mean, well, if you include half of this one, maybe 1.5 through hikes, because I used them quite a lot last year. So yeah, they've done a fair mileage. So, but I put another pair in my resupply box and just swapped them out and sent them home. So in terms of what I'm wearing on my legs, okay, these are skins, tights, whatever you want to call them, leggings. I bought a new pair for the Bibbulmun because they're compression pants and they're supposed to have they're supposed to compress your legs, okay? So that, you know, any kind of compression wear, whether it's a dressing or whatever, functions by applying pressure, you know, across the limb. So if they're not applying pressure, then they're not compression pants. So my old ones were getting to the stage I thought that, you know, they weren't really doing much, so I replaced them at the start of the track, and they were also starting to wear, so I figured they were going to start getting some significant holes as well. I find these fantastic. I've got a video about why men in particular, but really anyone should wear them. I think the compression part is useful, and there's certainly studies that have shown that that compression, certainly post-exercise, helps with your recovery, and during exercise, you know, they suggest that it helps with your performance as well. I personally find that, you know, I don't get as much you know, muscle pain and things like that when I'm using them. You know, I seem to be able to go a lot further and not have as many issues. But there's a whole range of other reasons I use them. I mean, for example, I've got a video on it, but for example, when I was going through some of the heath, there were ticks, and I was regularly seeing ticks on the outside of my pants, but I could just flick them off. Okay, whereas if you're wearing pants, you know, with traditional trousers, I suppose, the ticks can go up the inside, you know, where you can't see them. There's all sorts of places that they can hide, whereas on these, there's nowhere to hide. Okay, they have to go up the outside, so you can just see them. They're usually a different color, so you can just flick them off as you go. But you know, my primary reason for using them is to reduce chafing and you know, heat rash and things like that, which they do reasonably effectively. You know, particularly in these kind of autumn/winter conditions, they work really great. So a whole heap of reasons why I use them, but I think they're a great thing. I wear these little shorts, just running shorts over the top, primarily for modesty. Okay, they don't really serve any other function. I do have a small survival kit. It's a really tiny one that I keep in one of the pouches at the back, so it's not my primary what I'd call survival gear, but it has some basic stuff, like it's got a fire steel and a small sort of blade that, you know, it's not really a proper knife, but it's you could use it for sort of opening packets and doing things like that, or maybe small cutting duties, I suppose. But primarily it's a striker for the fire steel. I've got some tinder in there. I've got different types of medication. I've got water purification tablets. I've got a $50 note, which I always put in my survival kits. So yeah, that's really the only other thing I use the shorts for. I've just got a friend who refuses to hike with me unless I wear shorts over my compression pants, so I'll leave that to your imagination. Now, my top, this is actually merino, or it's a composite actually of merino and synthetics. It's made by IO Merino, a company, I don't know where they're from, Australia or somewhere, but anyway, I really like this. I've been using it for quite a long time. It's got a few holes in and that, because it's, you know, had quite a lot of use. This one's probably done, yeah, probably at least the equivalent of two through hikes, you know, maybe more, you know, a couple of 1,000 kilometers at least. Still going strong, but it's kind of, you know, getting a bit worn by now. I like it. I don't have a hood. Okay, I don't wear a hoodie because my hat sort of covers that. But I like the fact you can pull the top of the arms up a bit. You know, you've got a thumb hole, so that gives you a bit of sun protection. So if you're not wearing sun gloves, you've got a bit of protection there. Also for a little bit of warmth, not a lot, but some. And I like full length arms because I don't like getting sunburnt on my arms and all the damage that causes. Otherwise, I've been really happy with them. Like all of my clothes, they dry really quickly, so I choose stuff that dries really quick, so that, you know, if I'm in town overnight, I can just wash everything and get it dry really quickly, or, you know, perhaps hang things up on my pack as I'm going along to dry. So this is all thin layers that dry quickly, and the layering process is what keeps you warm and dry and all that sort of stuff. Okay, in terms of just a general review of this, I think the performance has been really great. I'd happily buy another one. It's starting to wear a bit on the arms, okay, just from having a pack on it. But, you know, given the mileage that this has done, I don't think that's too bad. And it's not like it's falling apart or anything. It's just sort of worn quite thin. Okay, what else? My sunglasses. Okay, somebody asked me about these the other day, and I did remember the name, and then I promptly forgot it again, so I might have to put it in the description. Anyway, these sunglasses are great. They just have like a cord. They don't have the traditional arms on the side, and you just put them on and, you know, tighten them not too tight. Okay, so they just sit on your face comfortably like that, and when you're not using them, you just drop them down. I didn't use the sunnies much at all on this trip because, you know, we had a lot of cloudy days and being under forest canopy and that sort of stuff, but great for when you are out in the open. My hat, I've got a video on my choice of hiking hat. This is a adapter cap. Okay, I find these fantastic, you know, particularly for alpine or beach walking and things like that, but really anywhere that you're going to be exposed to low sun angles and things like that, walking in the evening or in the morning, I think it's great because you can pull them right up, Okay, and if you've got sunglasses on, your face is completely covered there. Okay, or you can just have protection on the back of your neck, like that. And you can actually put it all the way out of the way if you want to, and just have your neck exposed if it's really hot. But I never found that to be an issue, and it's got a big brim at the front. This hat's obviously done a massive amount of mileage. I wouldn't even like to guess how much it's done. And I've used it for dive trips and things like that, so it's been through the ringer and it's falling apart. But you know, this is about my 3rd or 4th adapter cap. I originally started using them up on the reef when I was working out on the reef flats, because the sun's just coming at you from all angles and you just need this kind of protection. But I think these are awesome, and yeah, you don't really need to wear a sun hood because they are a sun hood as well. So adapter cap, awesome. Okay, so let's move on to my pack and what I'm carrying. So just one thing I'll mention, I'll show you as I go through, but I've got a forward-facing pocket on the bottom of my pack, which some people use for food and snacks. I'm not really a fan of that. I actually carry my poncho in there. So I use the poncho for this trip, mainly, well, to a large extent because my pack is not waterproof, this particular pack. It's a gridstop material, which is perhaps a little bit more durable than some of the waterproof packs, or the ultralight ones anyway. But it's also was what I could get at the time, and in a colour that I wanted, particularly for road walking and things like that, to be nice and visible. So it's not waterproof, which really doesn't bother me because even your waterproof packs become not waterproof pretty soon. I've got a DCF pack which leaks now. So yeah, the poncho is perfect. It covers the pack, it covers me, it covers everything on the front. I can still access everything. Yeah, I'll talk about the poncho later anyway. But that's easy just to pull out, and if it starts raining, I usually just pull my sleeves up on my shirt and put the poncho on. Covers everything. My legs get wet, but again, you know, all of this stuff dries really quickly, so it doesn't really matter. Now, with my setup, what I do is I noticed a lot of people on the track using particularly women, using the ARN packs, okay, which have pouches on the front. Now, I had one of those packs a number of years ago. I think they're great packs. I guess the only reason I changed was because I wanted to go lighter. You know, with my back and everything, I can't really carry a lot of weight, and also there was the volume. The pack had a lot more volume than I actually needed. So when you start to reduce your gear down, you know, the volume of the pack, you don't need as much volume. Okay, so I went away from the ARN, but I still wanted to use a similar approach because they allow you to transfer weight to the front of your pack. Now, there's at least one study I found recently, one research study that showed that transferring weight to the front of your body was actually the most effective way in terms of maintaining appropriate posture and so forth. So I think, you know, there's good science backing up the whole approach. So for me to do that same sort of thing in I guess a more ultralight way, I have this Z-Packs pouch which I carry on the front, and I have pockets also. So this is a running vest style jacket, running vest style pack I should say, it has lots of pockets, so I can put small heavy items on the front and stuff like my water bottles, which are quite heavy, and I can put small heavy items into this pouch on the front as well, so that transfers some of the weight forward. And then what I do is I put lighter, well, not necessarily lighter, but less dense or less dense stuff in the pack. So things like my quilt and so forth, which are bulky, but you know, the weight is more what's the word? Anyway, they weigh a certain amount, but you know, the weight is not as dense. I mean, you couldn't really put your quilt on the front of your body. Okay, that would be silly. probably. It'd be too bulky, you know, take up too much space. But if you have something that's equivalent weight to that quilt that's relatively small because of its density, you can put that on the front. So just to explain what I have here, I'll start with the pouch. In this pouch, I have my cook kit, and I have small heavy items. I have my maps, so I pull them out during the day, and I sometimes tuck them in here as well, so they're a bit more accessible. And I have my food for the day, okay, so all my snacks and so forth. Now, the reason I put my food stuff in here rather than in the pack itself is that I don't want the smell of the food, particularly snacks, which you're constantly opening and, you know, handling, to infuse my pack, okay? This little pouch, what I was doing on the Bibbulmun was putting it into the boxes. You know, whenever there was a rat or a mouse-proof box in one of the cabins, I would put this in there, okay, because this has food odors on it. And my pack, I could just hang that, and I wasn't quite so concerned about it. Anyway, I'll just quickly show you what's in here. Now, it's pretty empty at the moment because I'm not hiking today, so I don't have any snacks in there. There's my cook kit, okay, that's my entire cook kit. It's got my, so this is, I won't go through it because I've got a video about this system, but it's basically, the pot is a Vargo bot, which can be used for cold soaking as well as as a cook pot. It's got my fuel in the center there, okay, so that's about 8 days worth of fuel. I used methylated spirits. It's got a basic survival kit, so this has got a lighter, it's got a tea bag, that's a Bob Cooper thing, it's got some potassium permanganate for purifying water, it's got tinder, all that kind of stuff. Also, as part of the survival kit, it's got some cordage, okay, this is a ridgeline, okay, a fast deploy ridgeline, which I can use with a tarp or with a survival blanket type thing. That's quite a large one. I use this particular type of cordage because it's very light, but equally strong as some of the more popular stuff. On this trip, I was using it to hang my pack, okay, and my food if necessary. So that was really good rat protection. I've got my, I don't actually use, well, I carry a lighter as a backup, but I actually use a fire steel because I find it far more reliable than matches or a lighter. It'll work, you know. I showed somebody on the other day, I just dropped it in some water and then pulled it out, and like within seconds I could get a spark and ignite my fuel. The actual stove or burner is on the bottom there. That's a little Tokes, I think, yeah, Tokes alcohol burner, and I've got a tie-try windshield. Now I found, and I've got a video going through this in quite a lot of detail, showing my experimental design and so forth, but I found from some experimental work that this particular Metz burner with this windshield was the most effective system for, and the most, I guess, predictable system for boiling water, which is what I primarily do. Okay, so if you're doing fancy meals and stuff, then you might have other choices. But for me, all I'm interested in is boiling X amount of water to rehydrate meals and so forth. So this will do that really quickly and really reliably, and that's why I can predict exactly how much fuel I'm going to need for the trip, because it will even work in 25 km/h winds, which most stoves, no matter how good they are, won't. Okay, so this is an incredible system. It's highly reliable and very lightweight, and it all packs into my pot like that. Okay, so I have that. I have a little bit of medication, just things like, well, I was getting some back pain and that, so anti-inflammatories. I've got some salt tablets, electrolytes, that's the word I'm thinking of, just stuff like that. Okay, so just basic things. That's my toothbrush and floss and toothpaste tablets, all that sort of thing. I've got an emergency, that's part of my survival kit, an emergency bar there for food. I actually brought quite a large knife with me. Okay, this is an Ezzy Azula. I brought this one, oh, it's starting to rust, I'll have to clean it. I bought this one because I was thinking it would be good if I had to light fires, and that particularly in an emergency, if I needed to get a fire going, or just for cooking if I ran out of fuel. As it turns out, it was good when we had wet wood. I was able to sort of scrape all of the wet bark and that sort of thing off, and clean it up, so we had the drier core to work with. But I think if I was really keen on fires, I might take. I don't know whether I'd necessarily worry about carrying such a large knife. This was good when my wrist was very painful, because I could use it quite effectively compared to a smaller knife. And it also gives you something you can baton with. But I think for the wood that we're encountering, probably a small saw would have been a better choice. Just go for a little tiny pocket knife just for general duties, and then like this one here, which is what I normally carry. Okay, that's just a little Spyderco, which are awesome knives, by the way. That's a Spyderco Salt, one of the Spyderco Salt range. They never rust, and they're just fantastic little knives. But I'd probably go for that, and just a small saw like a Silky. Okay, I've got one with a blade about that long, which would be beautiful for the wood around here, because the biggest issue we had was finding wood of the right size. But yeah, anyway, if you're into fires, then maybe you might consider carrying a small saw or something like that. Personally, I'm not that bothered. I don't really need to have a fire, and most of the time they're not really doing you any good, because you can only really have them in the evening. You can't have them inside the hut, and it's usually early in the morning when you start to get cold. Anyway, spoon or spork rather. And that's basically my cook kit, and I would just put my maps in here with all of this stuff, and all of my snacks for the day, my high calorie snacks. And it just sits there, and I can just feed myself as I go along. Okay, I should speed up a little bit because I'm kind of dragging this out, so we'll get rid of that. Water bottles. Okay, so I had 2 water bottles with the smart bottles with those caps like that, which allow you to basically reverse flush your filtration system. So for me, I had a small Sawyer, and I could plug one of these in with clean water and back flush it quite easily. But I had these on the front because I've got some bursitis in the shoulder at the moment, and I can't really reach back to get it. I can with this hand, but not with this side. So I thought that was a good idea to have these on the front. Also brings weight forward, so there's 2 kilos there that you don't have to have on your back. They're on your front, so bring the weight forward. Yeah, and I usually filtered my water in the evenings and carried a couple of litres most days. Probably didn't need quite that much, but I like to have a little bit in reserve in case I have to stop or whatever, camp somewhere overnight rather than in a shelter. Okay, rest of the stuff on the front here, some hand sanitizer. This is where my phone goes, which I'm obviously using at the moment, but for navigation, communication, all that sort of stuff, phone goes in there, so it's easy access. I can pull it out. I did use the Far Out app quite a lot, okay, when I was doing the Bibbulmun Track. That's really good. But then I also had the maps and compass, which is up the top here. Okay, so that's a mirror compass. Doesn't seem very ultralight, and I suppose some of the stuff that I'm showing you here wouldn't be considered ultralight, but I think this kind of proper good quality compass is a great idea, and having a mirror, whether it's one of these or a separate survival mirror, is a great idea, because you can, if you get an injury on your face, you can check it out, somewhere that you can't see behind you, maybe a tick or something you might be looking for. The mirror is really great for that, and signaling if there's if there's an emergency, and a good quality compass. Okay, Probably the only change I would make to that is that I might try and get one of these which has a built-in magnifying glass. So I've actually got a separate magnifying glass that I carry in my first aid kit, and it's good, but it's not really necessarily available all the time, whereas if it's in here I'd be able to grab it quickly if I had to look at some detail on a map or something small. On the other side, I also have my power bank here. Okay, small heavy item, it's in a waterproof bag, and I've got my charge cable. If necessary, I can actually connect that to my phone while I'm walking and charge it up, but I only did that once or twice. Generally I do that in camp. On the other side I've got some sunscreen, okay, and I've also got my torch, which is a Nightcore NU25, okay, just with a cord to put it on my head. So I found this awesome. This is a fantastic little torch, and I met at least one person who thought it was better than the new version of the NU25, this older version, because it's got a nice low red setting that you can use in camp and it doesn't disturb anybody. Okay, so I use that quite a lot, and you can also turn it right up if you really need a strong torch. You know, you can get a really powerful, obviously reduces your battery life, but you can have a really powerful torch if you need to. Okay, so I'll move on to the rest of the pack. I've got a little whistle here that I added, so I did modify the pack a little bit. This waist belt that I'm wearing is a modification as well. They're made by Light AF. Okay, so I made a few modifications. I like to have the weight, or some of the weight, on my hips to protect my back a bit, because I find if I have all my weight on my shoulders, it hurts my lower back. Okay, so not only do I need to keep my weight down that I'm carrying, but I also need to look at how I distribute the weight, and with this harness I can easily adjust things. Just in general, I found this running style vest very comfortable. Okay, so you know, I think with any pack, depending on how much weight you've got in it, you're going to start getting a bit of pain anyway, but or soreness in your shoulders. But I found it pretty good. You know, I mean, when I had it fully loaded, you could feel it. You know, but I would what I'd do is I'd adjust it so that a bit more of the weight was on my hips. Okay. All right, so let's get into the pack. I'll take it off so I can show you everything. So I set my pack up so that I could actually access things fairly easily that I needed during the day. Okay, that's why I got the stuff in the pockets here. And the further round things go, the less likely I'm going to need them. Okay, and then the stuff that's inside the pack is only really for camp. So as I mentioned, I have my poncho in the bottom here. Okay, so that's easy to pull out. Okay, there we go. So that's the pouch at the bottom there, or the pocket. Okay, really handy elastic pocket. And here's my poncho. This is a Z-Pax poncho ground sheet. So I've looked at poncho tarps in the past, and I've tried a range of different ones, but I find the ground sheet is a better size. It's not too big and bulky, so it doesn't catch on things quite as easily. And for my system, I like to have a proper tarp. You know, I find that the poncho tarps are a little bit small. You know, they don't really give you much coverage. So rather than have a poncho tarp, I'd rather have a separate tarp, a good quality one, say a 7x9 or a 3 metre by 3 metre, depending on, you know, what it's made of. So, you know, maybe a bigger one if it's DCF. That, you know, will work really well, and I can use in a range of different configurations. I can use with a hammock, or I can use with a bivvy. Okay, and they'll give me, you know, adequate protection for both of those, and then just have a ground sheet, okay, as my poncho. My poncho is a ground sheet, and this can go underneath my bivvy. Okay, so you can unzip the sides like that, and just lay it out flat and put it underneath a bivvy. You can wrap it around a hammock if you're using it. You know, if you need a bit of extra protection, if there's strong winds or something, and maybe rain being blown under your tarp, you can wrap it around the outside of the hammock. But yeah, principally it's a ground sheet, and you can use it as a sit pad as well. I use this quite a lot to sit on. I found it was fantastic. This shirt, even though like I was out sometimes in you know, continuous rain for the entire day, you know, there would be bits of my shirt that were wet, but you know, predominantly I was dry. You know, and I think that's the thing with a poncho. They work far more effectively, I've found, than a rain shell, because in a rain shell, it's like anything, you know, that's waterproof, that you're breathing into or sweating into. It's condensation is going to happen, and if you don't get wet from water that's outside, you're going to get wet from the water that's inside. Whereas a poncho, yes, that's still true, you still do get that, but to a lesser extent, because you know, you've got some ventilation and you can put it on and off really quickly. So rain shell is really slow and you have to take your pack off, whereas this, I can just chuck it on over the top of my pack. You saw how easily it came out then, and I can pack it back in when I don't need it. So I found this great. It just fits me very tightly. I pull my sleeves up so that my arms can get wet, but you know, the sleeves should stay dry. Yeah, poncho ground sheet, and this is a DCF, and it's made by Z-Packs. I don't know if anyone else makes a similar thing. Others have been quite successful just with regular ponchos. I know Pam used one and was quite happy with it. So I've got, you know, a couple of, on the outside of my pack here, I've got a couple of cloths that I use. This one is sort of my semi-clean one, which is for, you know, my face, for drying things off and that. This is my dirty one, if you like to think of it like that. I use it for washing up areas that get very sweaty and smelly, and I'll let your imagination deal with that. So I have two different cloths. This is actually one of the Bibbulmun Track neck gaiters. I probably wouldn't have chosen this one if I was going to, you know, if it wasn't the Bibbulmun Track, but I wanted to kind of show the colours, so I went with that. I've actually got one at home which is the same weight, but it's a little bit more absorbent, so that would probably be a better choice, particularly if you're going to use it for drying yourself off, toweling yourself down and that. So there's nothing in that side pocket at the moment. I did have my water filter in there at one stage, which I could reach from this side because my left arm does actually work. So I could, if I had some water that I needed to collect on the way and filter it, I could do that. On the other side, I've got, actually my water filter is over this side at the moment. Normally it's on the other side. The cap's not on it, the top's not on it at the moment, but it's just attached to a bottle. Now, this is one of the failures I had. I went through 3 of these bottles. This one's actually broken as well. It leaks, filtering water. These filters are very slow, the little Sawyers. I actually want to get myself one of the big ones, but they're pretty hard to find. The original Sawyer squeezers. I've got one at home, but it's quite an old one. And so you put a lot of pressure on the bags and they seem to fail. I've been told the NOC, C-N-O-C, I think, bags are much better, you know, lasting for a very long time. So I'm going to try and get myself one of those for filtering water. So when these broke, I ended up just using putting the filter on top of one of my water bottles and using that to filter water. That was kind of my final option, because I went through 2 of these. I went through the spare that I'd put in my resupply box, so that was 3. So I had 3 of these fail. So eventually I just had to use my actual water bottles to filter. Now, if I stop to go to the loo or anything, I've got a toilet kit here. Okay, in a little DCF bag. This has got a few things in. It's got a small trowel, one of the Deuce of Spades, I think. It's got some soap, regular soap, in a film container, one of the old style photographic film containers. It's got a small bidet, so the bidet was kind of my backup if I ran out of toilet paper, you know, and also I used it for washing as well, so that was quite handy. It has some spare seals, rubber gaskets for the bidet. What else have I got in there? I did have some of these towelettes as well, some spare ones. These sort of add water and they kind of expand. So I had a couple of those. I had some spare earplugs in there at one stage. So it's got some of the biodegradable toilet paper in its own bag. So a couple of rolls of that. I've also got some Dr. Brommer's, okay, which is a liquid soap, and I found that really good. Okay, so you can use that for hand washing. You can use it for washing all of your body. You can use it for washing your clothes. Yeah, it's good stuff. You just have to be a bit careful not to get it in your eyes. I've also got one of those for her body glides. I don't think I'd use it again. I didn't really find it that good. I actually found some other, I used to, at the start of the track, I was using some other anti-chafing stuff, which I thought was a lot better. It was like a liquid that I got from the chemist. So yeah, I'd probably use that instead. Anyway, that's my toilet kit. It's probably a little bit more complicated than most people's toilet kit, but you know, I sometimes have problems with my, you know, with that area, so I carry, I like to make sure I've got plenty of toilet paper and, you know, backups and that. In this top little pocket here, the shelf pocket, I've also got some steaks. So I use the MSR groundhog steaks. I think I've probably got about 6 in there. Or maybe I've got 4 of those and a couple of another type, because I've also got these V-shaped steaks, and I've also got these little titanium shepherd's hook. The titanium shepherd's hook can actually be used in combination with my cook system if I want to use wood in the tie-try instead of the alcohol stove. So that gives me another option. So 10 steaks. And down the bottom here I have my rubbish bag. Okay, so that's just an odor-proof sack, but it's probably not very odor-proof now. Okay, so that's the stuff that's on the outside, things that I might possibly need during the day, either while I'm walking or perhaps when I take my pack off. So obviously if I'm going to the loo, I'm going to take my pack off, so I don't have to be able to reach my toilet kit with the pack on. Stuff that's inside the pack, so I'll go through that quickly. Oh, I keep looking at it and I'm forgetting. I always wear a watch, okay, but this is not a watch you have to charge. This is a citizen diver's watch, so I'm sure everybody knows that I'm a diver. I actually don't use this when I'm diving, but it's waterproof, obviously, to 200 meters or something ridiculous. It's solar powered, so I never have to charge or replace the battery. I just want a solid, reliable watch that's gonna, you know, basically be bulletproof. So for me, this is a part of my survival kit, my survival and my safety gear. It means I don't have to switch my phone on to know what the time is. I can, when I'm walking, I use the watch to estimate my distance because I know roughly what my walking speed is, you know, under certain conditions. So I can use it to estimate where I'm going to be or how far I've covered. Okay, so, and also I can say, well, it's going to take me two hours to get to this particular point, so I can monitor the time on here and I don't have to waste battery on my phone. The phone can be switched off. You can also use it to find north. Yeah, just a good solid watch I think is always important. I don't go for smart watches or anything like that because they need to be recharged. Yeah, you can get more information from them, but I mean, I can get everything I need from this. You know, I can use it for direction to some extent if I need to, timing, distance, all of those kind of things. So yeah, good solid watch. I think that's all I can think of for stuff I'm wearing. Now, in the top of my pack are a few things that I might possibly need during the day or when I first get to camp. So I've got my rain shell, okay. So there's this is Montbell Versalite, okay, they're both Versalite. Pretty lightweight, pretty badly dinged up at the moment because, you know, they've done quite a bit of work. I only once used these for walking, okay, I think, maybe twice. Yeah, maybe twice on the Bibbulmun, but you know, only for part of the day. I don't really like walking in rain gear because you just get too hot and sweaty even when it's wet. But when I was going to Walpole, I walked the entire day in very cold, windy conditions. It was when we had some really bad weather, and I just wanted to be absolutely sure that I kept my body temperature up, you know, because I was a little bit concerned with the downhill stuff at least, that I might cool off. I probably would have been fine, but the thing is, I was walking into a motel room, so I knew that I could just walk straight into a shower, you know, and it didn't matter that this was wet. Generally, I prefer not to get this wet because I really tend to use it more for more as a wind shell, you know, to protect me when I get to camp, so I stay warm, or maybe during the day if it's a bit cold, I can chuck my jacket on. So I mainly use it as a wind shell. I could probably get away with a wind shirt and wind pants instead, but these I thought might be, you know, might be a little bit better for the same weight to have something that was waterproof. It also means that at night, well actually I also wear these at night as a sort of vapor barrier for my sleeping bag, so I wear them over my thermals, and that's, you know, I think that's also quite effective. It ensures that your quilt doesn't get as damp as it might otherwise from your sweat and so forth. Although you do get a little bit sort of clammy. What else can I say about them? Insect protection, that's the other thing when you're in camp. But yeah, generally I keep them dry. I suppose if I had to go to the toilet during the night, you know, this is waterproof, so you know I've got this option. And if I'm using my my poncho for something else, yeah. Anyway, Ultralight rain jacket, Ultralight pants. Now, these I've actually got my thermals in the legs because, you know, they're on top of the pack. As I say, this pack isn't 100% waterproof. Water will get through it here if there's a lot of rain, although with the poncho it shouldn't be an issue. So what I do is I put my thermal layer, my camp clothes, inside my legs of these waterproof pants, and that way if a bit of water does get into my pack, it's not going to wet my camp stuff. Okay, so they're going to stay dry. So I've got some thermal pants that I wear at camp. You know, these are just icebreaker merino. Okay, very simple, very warm, easy to dry when I wash them. And I've got a Kauai Peloton. Okay, and that's my my hoodie that I can wear in camp. I sleep in this as well. Okay, it's basically like my shirt really, but instead of wearing this at night, I wear this, and this is a bit warmer. And in the morning, if it's cold, I can actually have this over the top as a sort of a pullover for a bit of warmth. It's got a nice hood on it. Okay, it's very light. That's my ditty bag. Okay, DCF ditty bag. So in here I've got my charger. I've actually got my, well, I'll mention my spare socks. So these are my Injinji socks. Okay, the new pair that I just bought. So this is my second pair of socks that I carry with me. I've got the pair that I'm wearing, and then my second pair. And these again I would use if it was wet. These are new ones I'm trying. They're wool ones. Okay, so I guess we'll see how we go. My charger's inside there. It's a fast charger. Okay, it's in a waterproof bag as well, just in case, I don't know, all of the different layers of water protection fail, which is probably unlikely, but anyway. I've got, in my other sock, I've got my Garmin InReach, okay, my satellite communicator, which I use to let my family know that I'm okay when I get to camp, if there's no phone coverage. And it's also my emergency system, and you can use it for navigation, which I don't tend to do, but you know, you can also use it for getting the weather, you know, if you're in remote areas, all that sort of stuff. I use that a bit in the southwest of Tasmania because there's no phone coverage. I've got my first aid kit. I won't go through this in detail. I've got pretty comprehensive first aid kit for ultralight. Okay, the main stuff I used out of here, I used some of my blister patches. I used all of my, well, not all of my tenacious tape. I did use a fair bit of that, but I used all of my Leuco tape out of here, so I've got to replace that. I've got a snake bandage, medication, different dressings, you know, like dressings that will stop bleeding, yeah, all that kind of stuff. Anyway, you can watch the video if you want to see what I have in my first aid kit. It's pretty comprehensive, you know, I mean, that's a pretty decent, it's not just a few tablets, but in terms of tablets, you know, like I've got gastro stop, I've got, you know, pain medication, anti-inflammatories, all that sort of stuff. My quilt, no, sorry, not my quilt, my tarp, okay. So this is just a really low cost 6x9, 7x9 sil poly tarp. It's about just under 280 grams, I think, so it's pretty heavy. I probably will get a new DCF one. I've had DCF in the past, but I want to try and get one a bit slightly higher quality than the ones I had before. Maybe camo for, you know, if I'm stealth camping or don't want people bothering me. Anyway, this is pretty good. It's worked really well. Packs down nice and small. I was putting it into a sort of a plastic bag, and what I was doing was, when my food bag was full, I didn't have as much space in my pack, I would actually shove it down the back in here, okay? And you could do that if it was wet as well, so if your tarp got wet during the night, you put it down there. On the Bibbulmun Track, I only actually used it once, and that was at Peaceful Bay. The rest of the time I just slept in my bivvy in the huts. So, you know, the most people we had was 6 people in a hut, so it wasn't a problem. But, you know, important to have, you know, a backup if you do need to go outside. So, you know, if you do need to sleep in one of the campsites, you know, it's important to have a way of doing that. So I didn't bring a tent because my tent's not that warm, so I stuck with the bivvy and tarp system, which for me I thought was much more effective than you know, a cold tent, and much more flexible. You know, being able to put the bivvy up in the shelters. Okay, here's my food bag. So there's a day's food in there. I think I carried too much food. I always had like 1 to 2 days food at least left over. So I really probably overestimated how much food I was going to eat. But you know, that's all right. So in there I've got a breakfast, all my daily snacks and my dinner. And I've also got my recovery mix that I had in the evenings. Yeah, so that's a DCF bag. In here I've got a Z-Packs, what you call it? It's basically a liner bag, so you can use it for lining your pack, but you can also use it, it's odor proof, so you can use it in here to reduce the odors. So I was trying to keep the food odors to a minimum. So if I'm going to put that into my pack, I don't want it introducing food odor to my pack to make it attractive to rodents. So I've got all my food inside an odor-proof bag, which is sealed up, and then the odor-proof bag goes inside this DCF bag for a little bit more protection. Now, the last thing in here is my stuff that I need to keep dry. So this is my pack liner. Can't remember what you call it. It's a particular type of material. Polycryo? No, I don't know. I've got a polycryo ground sheet. I might be, which I didn't carry with me on this trip because I had the poncho. But I don't know whether this is polycryo or not. I can't remember. But anyway, it's a food grade type material, which is a bit tougher than a lot of the things you use as liners. And it's also, again, odor proof, although not that it needs to be for this stuff. So in this bag is everything that I absolutely must keep dry, okay? So absolutely critical. So there's my synthetic puffy, okay. I used a synthetic puffy because my quilt is down. If the quilt gets wet, I want to have a backup, okay. Now synthetic will keep you warm even when it's wet, so that's why I have this. So down is what I use for my quilt, because for this rated quilt synthetic would be quite heavy, but I want to have some sort of synthetic warm layer that I can wear at night that is not going to be as affected by the wet, okay. So if something bizarre happens and I manage to get my this stuff wet, at least this is going to give me some protection, along with the other synthetic layers that I've got. I've got an emergency blanket in here, so this is a Bob Cooper emergency blanket, which has the word help. I won't pull it all the way out, but it's got the word help written on it, which I think is a brilliant idea. So if you're in real trouble, you can put this out as a message to get attention, okay? And it's also got the reflective layer on the other side. Now, I did actually use this because I think my quilt's it's a -6, but it's kind of getting to the stage. It's had so much use that it's not really a -6 anymore. So what I found was that on some of the really cold nights, probably only, maybe 3 or 4 times, I think, on the whole track, I found that my lower back and my bum and legs were starting to get a little bit cool. So I just wrapped this around them, and it was brilliant. Just, you warm up really quickly, yeah, works beautifully, and it weighs next to nothing. So that's a great addition to your shelter. And then finally, I've got my bedroll, and I call it a bedroll because it's got all of my bedding together in the one package, and I can just roll it straight out, which I can show you in another video. I can roll it straight out when I get to camp and inflate my mattress, which is in here, my air mat, and my bedding's ready to go. Oh, inflate my pillow as well, that's the other thing. So I won't pull it all the way out, but this is my bivvy. It's a Bora Gear bivvy, which is fantastic. Really happy with it. It's got a waterproof base, so you can put it on the ground if you need to, and it's got, although I'd put my ground sheet poncho underneath it, and it's got a breathable top, okay? I found the bivvy fantastic because it's small. It's not like putting up a tent in a shelter. The bivvy is no bigger than the footprint of my air mat. So it's perfect. It doesn't take up any extra space. I just hang the mosquito net, put the mosquito net up so it pulls it off my face. So I've got insect protection, and it actually keeps you a lot warmer. I found every time during the night I would open up the bivvy to get out to go to the toilet or something, I could feel the cold air coming in, which seems crazy because it's got the mosquito netting at the top, but no, it keeps the warmth in really well. But it's breathable as well, so you don't get sort of condensation on the inside. So yeah, it's great. So all I do is roll this out, my quilt's in here, and my sleeping mat. I blow up the sleeping mat and I'm just ready to go. I mean, sometimes I take the quilt out and give it, if there's a lot of sun, give it a bit of air and a bit of light, because you want to take every opportunity you can to dry it out to make sure you get the maximum thermal performance out of it. So this has got a black inner lining, and if you turn inside out, that just absorbs the heat and just dries it out really quickly if there's any moisture in there, and helps puff the whole thing up. And the more puffy it is, obviously the better it's going to be. So if there's an opportunity, it's good to take it out, but if you haven't got that chance, you can just roll it out and your bedding's ready to go. Yeah, and the other thing is that being rolled up like this inside my pack means that there's an extra layer again of waterproof protection. So this waterproof base is protecting my quilt, okay, and also my sleeping mat, but the sleeping mat's not so important. I should mention that this sleeping mat was not my preferred choice. I had to replace my sleeping mat halfway through the Bibbulmun, and I replaced it with one of the cedar summits. But it was good. It worked okay. I mean, it was narrower than I really want, and I'll probably buy a wider pad. but it did the job for what I needed. It was reasonably comfortable, so I was able to sleep on my side okay, and my back also okay. My arms obviously would fall off the side, but I could tuck them into my legs and my pants just to keep them together. So yeah, it's not exactly what I wanted, but it worked fine, and it rolls up very easily, deflates quite well. So yeah, that was my sleep system, and it worked beautifully. I wouldn't have chosen anything else. You know, I definitely wouldn't have brought my tent for the Bibbulmun, because, you know, I might have used it once, you know, and that would have been a complete waste. You know, whereas with this, if I did have to sleep outside, it's no problem. You know, it's a bivvy. It's waterproof on the base. It's mostly waterproof on the top, or water resistant, I should say, on the top. So if you've got a bit of spray under your tarp, it wouldn't be a problem. But I mean, you can pitch the tarp low enough that it's not going to be a problem. You know, you're not going to have an issue with rain. So yeah, I think this is a perfect solution personally for the Bibbulmun, where 99% of the time you're in a shelter, and you've got that, you know, that extra warmth of the bivvy, and you've got that that insect protection, and just all those other benefits of just keeping your whole sleep system together and making it really easy to deploy and to pack up in the morning. Okay, so that's my system that I use. That's my approach to the Bibbulmun, and what I'm using at the moment anyway, moving forward. I'll just say a couple of things. What shall I start with? I'll talk about gear failures and gear choices a little bit. So while I've got the pack here, I'll just mention that a lot of people said, oh wow, you know, your pack's really small, and quite often, you know, there's a certain implication in that, you know, if you're carrying a small, lightweight pack, that you're not set up or prepared, which is complete nonsense. Okay, I mean, I've got everything I need. You know, there was nothing that I was wanting for, with the exception, I probably would have liked maybe some waterproof gloves, you know, some ones that I could wear in the morning, just because it did get quite cold, but that was really just a luxury item. I mean, it didn't get cold enough that it was going to do me any harm. You know, it was just a bit inconvenient when I couldn't really use my fingers properly. So something like that would have been probably a good addition. But otherwise, I had all the gear I needed, you know, and I was comfortable, and I had heaps of food, and yeah, I couldn't really think why I would want to carry any more. I mean, you know, it would have been nice to have my camera with me, but, you know, I could have carried the camera if I wanted to. You know, I could have put it into my front pouch or something. But, you know, I don't want to get, you know, put people's noses out of joint in particular, or anything like that. But I just find that there is a perception that, you know, that heavy is that you have to be carrying a lot of gear, and, you know, you have to be toughing it out with a sort of heavy pack. And look, I've said before, I can't do that. My back is you know, no good. I would not be able to carry more than I carry here, you know, which might max out at 12 kilos maybe, but most of the time it'd be, you know, certainly under 10 kilos, and, you know, with warmer food and water and that, you know, maybe 8 to 10 most maximum, you know, maybe around 8 on average perhaps. And, you know, when I look at a lot of the gear that's for sale, I mean, I used to work in the dive industry, and I for a very long time I've used gear which is non-standard. You know, it's I got into side mount very early for my back. I used to use a harness and backplate system, and people would look at that and they'd go, but you've got no padding, you've got no adjustability. Well, I don't need either of those things. You know, you're not hiking with dive gear. You know, you're going in the ocean. You just need it to be locked in position. You know, you've got rubber or other stuff on to protect you from that. So I used to get a lot of that in the dive industry, and I find a similar thing with the hiking gear. And the other thing is that with the dive industry, I feel that, you know, a lot of the gear is made by people who just don't dive, and I think a lot of it is the same with hiking. You know, a lot of the gear is just made in mass, you know, mass produced. You know, and there's not a lot of thought really put into it. You know, I think if you look at the companies that are run by hikers, you know, by thru-hikers and things like that, the gear is much more dialed in, you know, for hiking. So, you know, I don't feel I need a framed pack, for example. But if I did want to get a framed pack, this company that I bought this pack from, this is a Nashville Packs Cutaway. They now make a framed pack. So if I wanted a framed pack, I could get a framed pack, similar design to this, for well under a kilo. Okay, and likewise, there are plenty of other companies that make framed packs with hip belts and, you know, padding and all of that sort of stuff for under a kilo. While I was on the track, I saw quite a lot of what are they called? Well, I saw some Z packs which were framed, so they make framed packs for under a kilo. So does Light AF, Atom packs. I think Bonfus might. I'm not sure. In the UK, in Europe, there's what are they called? I saw quite a few of them on this trip. They make a DCF pack. They're a US based one. They're quite a tough material, but they're still under a kilo. Anyway, I can't think of the name, but there are quite a number of brands, you know, that are very high quality, and you know, they're framed packs, but they're under a kilo. So really, I don't see any reason. I mean, okay, they might be a bit more expensive, maybe, but I mean, you're paying a lot of money for any pack that you buy. It's another company, a very common one, which I can't think of. Granite Gear, is it? Anyway, you can get them. You can get framed packs if that's what you want. If you need to carry a bit of extra weight. But for me, I don't find that I need a frame. I can transfer weight to my hips quite easily. So that's one thing. In terms of the pack, in terms of other gear, you know, I didn't really have much in the way of problems. I mentioned the 3 water bladders that I had fail, and I'm going to try one of the knock ones. They're supposed to be a bit better quality. I mentioned the flow rate of the Sawyer wasn't as good as I wanted it to be, so I'll probably get a Sawyer squeeze instead. The Injinji socks, I mentioned that, you know, they tend to wear out, so, you know, that's one issue. You know, I like mixing it up a bit, so I thought I'd keep the Injinji, and also for drying quickly, but you know, I guess that is a gear issue. The Big Agnes AXL Air pad that I had failed, so that was certainly an issue. Maybe one thing that was related to that, something I haven't actually mentioned, I have this foam pad that fits into the back of my pack. Now that's there to give me a little bit of padding at the back. Okay, and I can use it as a sit pad during the day as well. I can also open it up and, well, sleep on it. There's not really much room to sleep. But what I found was when my Big Agnes pad was failing, I was using this underneath me for a bit of thermal protection, so putting it under my bum and that. So I still had a little bit of inflation in the pad, but this would go under my bum or under my lower back and give me a little bit of insulation, so I stayed warm on those nights when the pad was failing. Maybe I might consider, well, at the very least, I would probably in future, I would take my larger version of this foam pad. So I've got one that's probably torso length, about that size. Okay, that would obviously cover a lot more of my body if my inflatable pad failed. So I think having that backup is important. I have also considered, and I may end up buying one while I'm here, one of those concertina pads, like the Nemo switchback, and possibly cutting it down a bit, because that could probably go in the same place this goes. Okay, it's about the right size to fit in there. I'm not sure if you could put the whole thing there though. You might have to sort of cut it down a bit, but they might offer a little bit more warmth. You know, if your pad did fail. I'm yet to decide about that, whether it's worth the extra weight and the extra bulk to carry something like that. But I know some people do the maths and they decide that that is a better option than an inflatable pad. I couldn't really sleep on one as my main pad, but you know, I might consider carrying, you know, a cut down version of one as a backup, for my inflatable pad. What else? There are a few things I brought which I didn't end up using and sent home. Like I brought a massage ball, one of those cork ones. I sent that home. My syringe for back flushing my water filter, I had that in one of my resupply boxes, but I sent it home. I did bring a hammock, but I decided that if you're going to use a hammock, like hammocks are great, you can use them in any conditions. You can use them in snow if you want to, but you have to have the right insulation set up for them. And to do that, if I brought the separate insulation for my hammock, so like an underquilt, it would have just increased the weight and the bulk of my setup quite substantially, so I didn't want to do that. I could have put my sleeping mat inside my hammock, but to be honest, I thought it would be too cold. And I think other people mentioned this, you know, on the when I talked about hammocks on the Bibbulmun group, and it's true. The hammock would have been too cold. If you've got proper insulation on the hammock, they're perfect. But if you're trying to do some sort of hybrid system, like using the sleeping pad, it's going to be too cold in these conditions. So I actually ended up sending the hammock home, and I was perfectly happy sleeping in my bivvy, so that was fine. Extras, yeah, I've mentioned the gloves. I might possibly have brought those. I did also mention some thermal leggings, but I don't think I really needed those because I was able to just use this, you know, emergency blanket over my legs at night for a bit of extra warmth. So that would have been just a waste of time. I wasn't the rest of the time I was fine. I wasn't cold at all. You know, when I was around camp, I just had those merino leggings on with the waterproof pants over the top, and that was fine. I was perfectly warm in those. Yeah, that's it. So look, I hope that's been of interest to everybody. If you've got any questions, let me know. Oh, one thing I will mention before I finish up, I did consider, instead of taking my puffy, I did consider taking this MacPack hoodie instead, and doubling it up with my other hoodie, the Kui. That could have been a good option, because I think, you know, in terms of thermal protection, this actually would work quite well. It's very light, so the combination of the two hoodies would have been lighter than the weight of the puffy. But I'm not 100% on that one, so you know, that was just something I considered. Maybe I'll try it on a future trip, maybe a shorter trip in colder conditions, just to, you know, where I've maybe got access to my car and I can just sort of swap between them and just sort of see how it works in comparison to just wearing a puffy. But anyway, that was just one other thing. Yeah, so I hope that's been of interest to you, and you know, it's given you something to think about. You know, maybe you don't agree with the way I approach things, but as I say, it worked fine for me. I was comfortable the whole way. You know, I could skip along the track at, you know, whatever pace I wanted to most of the time. You know, it wasn't weighed down too much. And look, you know, coming back to the weight thing, I found a number of studies recently. I was just doing a bit of a search, and you know, showing that really, you know, you can do some harm to yourself if you have too much weight. You know, I mean, you might not think of 16 or 20 kilos as a lot of weight, but you know, maybe it's not if you're just picking it up and moving it from one place to another, you know, in a controlled environment, you know, or maybe with a bit of help, you know, using proper lifting techniques and that. But when you've got it on your back, and it's you know, a dynamic weight, because you know, you're moving from side to side, or you know, you're shifting your body around, you know, I don't know, I just don't see how that can be really a safe proposition. You know, I just think, you know, and the number of injuries that people have as well, particularly early on in the track, you know, I just look at that and think, well, you know, if you're not carrying as much weight, then the consequences of, you know, turning your ankle or doing something like that are potentially much less severe, you know, than if you've got a lot of weight bearing down on your joints. Okay, and on your lower back as well, you know, all that weight bearing down on your lower back. I mean, for me, I definitely can't do that, you know, because, you know, I've got back injuries and shoulder problems and that, and neck problems. I can't afford it, and I can't afford to have bad posture either. And that's the other thing, that walking with a lot of weight on your back will cause, you know, it'll cause bad posture. which, you know, over a long term is going to do harm or aggravate existing problems. So look, you know, disagree with me if you wish, but I personally think that you should look at the research, you know, and yes, there are probably studies which, you know, go both ways, but, you know, just general common sense seems to suggest that if you don't need the weight, you know, if a lot of the weight that you're carrying is just unnecessary items like, you know, plastic containers to put everything in, you know, the hard plastic, or, you know, a cook system which, you know, could maybe do the same thing as my cook system, but mine's like a fraction of the weight, you know, why? You know, why do that? You know, and, you know, carrying more fuel than you need as well, you know, which are often the canisters tend to cause, you know, if you use the canister type systems. I knew exactly how much fuel I needed, so I could put exactly that amount, and the cost of the fuel was fractional of what it would be if I'd used a gas stove, you know, because it was, I just bought 1 litre of meths, and that did me for the entire trail. I just put as much as I needed into my resupply boxes. So that kind of stuff, I don't know, if you think it through carefully, and, you know, I mean, I'm not saying just jump in and use the lightest stuff you can possibly find. I mean, you need to also consider the limits of your own experience in that. And I've been using lightweight systems like this for a very long time, and, you know, I'm comfortable doing it, and I can sort of, you know, and I think that's it. You know, it's a learning process, and, you know, you can gradually refine things as you go, but just maybe consider that, you know, you don't need to have some of the stuff that you might be carrying already. You know, maybe things can be cut down a bit. Maybe some of your items don't need to be as heavy as they actually are. You know, and anyway, it's just a thought, and hopefully again this has been of interest to people. And I better be quiet. I better shut up now and get on and do something else while I'm in Perth. But all the best to everybody, and I hope you enjoyed the video.